Irashaimase! Hello and welcome to Fataris' Kitchen. I'm your host, Chef Fataris. It's time once again for Shoot 'em Up Saturday, and on the menu this week we have the Ai Cho Aniki collection. What kind of taste will it have? Let's get cooking and find out. From publisher Edia, the Ai Cho Aniki collection released for the Nintendo Switch in December of 2024, though only in the Japanese region. The collection includes the first two titles from the Ai Cho Aniki franchise, Ai Cho Aniki from 1992 and Ai Cho Aniki from 1995, both originally releasing on the PC Engine. Overall, I've had a lot of fun with this collection. It's great to have these bizarre, unique shoot-em-ups available on the Nintendo Switch, but there are a couple of issues with this collection. First off, the price is definitely on the higher side, given that it only includes two of the titles. It would have been wonderful had this collection included all of the Ai Cho Aniki titles, or at least all the Ai Cho Aniki shoot-em-ups. With all that said, though, if you're interested in picking this one up, I would recommend seeking out a physical, as it feels like that's the slightly better value for your money. For the purposes of today's review, we'll be looking at both titles included in the collection. First, when you select your title, you're taken to this screen here. So a couple notable options that are available. We have a visual mode that basically includes all the cutscenes from the game, and a sound mode which has some of the soundtrack, and it's very notable for this game as the Ai Cho Aniki soundtrack is definitely something unique and special to listen to. But there's also the manual, and this is something that's important specifically in Ai Cho Aniki. The manual for the original Ai Cho Aniki is actually really brief. It's just this insert and that's it. You also have a little screen that gives you your buttons, although you should be able to figure these ones out relatively quickly on your own, and then the game starts. Once the title starts up, we're taken directly into the game's opening cutscene. That basically explains the story of this evil space emperor who's expanding his empire to collect more protein so he can continue to dominate the Great Galaxy bodybuilding contest. Naturally, that's not okay, so we're being sent by the heavens to put a stop to this. Now finding ourselves at the main menu, you can select your difficulty from here, and once that's taken care of, we're taken to our character select. You have two characters to choose between, Ida 10 and Ben 10. The difference between the two primarily lies in their charged shot. Ben 10 has this laser spread shot, whereas Ida 10 has this beam that he fires straight forward. It's a little more straightforward to understand that shot, so he'll be the character that we're taking. Once selected, we have our opening stage description there. It actually is showing us the mini bosses that we'll encounter throughout the course of the stage, and then this is Ai Cho Aniki. It's definitely one of those shoot 'em ups that's just unique and bizarre in the enemies, the environment, the music, really all of it just comes across as so weird and even sometimes just like creepy. So it's a horizontal scroller with our main shot being the primary form of attack. But in addition to that main shot, we also have a couple other attack options. So as you hold down your button, you're actually charging up a charge shot, and you release your fire button, and you get, in the case of Ida 10 here, we get this beam. In addition to that, we can also pick up options to help out. They're more like friends, but they kind of are considered options. Including the two bodybuilders that would become kind of known as the face of the franchise, Samson and Adon, so here we have one of them with us now. And as you fire and release your charge shot, they also will fire beams as well. There are a couple other options that you could potentially get as well, but the bodybuilders are the most common that you'll see throughout the course of your gameplay. As we defeat some enemies, there'll also be capsules that are released that we can use to power up our main shots, both for our main character as well as the options. Although in order to power up the options, you need to pick the capsules up with the actual characters themselves. As far as stage progression are concerned, the stage is broken up into sections, each kind of like divided by mini-boss. For each stage, you've got 3 mini-bosses, and then ultimately the stage boss itself. So as far as other attacks are concerned, we also have bombs that we can use, and those bombs are kind of like an area of effect, cluster bomb really, so you do want to be careful where you deploy those. There's also the ability to change your speed, so you can go from speed 3 all the way up to speed 8, which is way too fast. And on the Switch controller, that's done with the minus button. So here's like speed 5, speed 8, which is just ludicrous, and then speed 3 I think is actually a really good place to hold that. So sometimes the bombs will go and use up your options. That's something to keep in mind, as those characters are temporarily gone from your team until they potentially respawn or you get a different one, like so. And then the original Ai Cho Aniki proceeds through that with several more stages. So this one is a lot more of a standard horizontal scrolling shoot 'em up than you would see in other iterations of the title, although some of the other ones that follow after are very similar to this one, including the last of the Ai Cho Aniki ones, Ai Cho Aniki 0, which borrows a lot from this title. So now we're fighting the final stage boss, and overall, at least at the beginning, the bosses themselves, so especially on the easier difficulties, are straightforward to take down. This boss here, we've got a pretty good safe spot there on the left, and with that, stage 1 is complete. We see our character and the character options that we have with us fly by, and now we're on to the next stage. And that's Ai Cho Aniki. So now we're going to hop back to the title screen so we can show you Ai Cho Aniki. Back at the title select, we're going to jump into Ai Cho Aniki. So like Ai Cho Aniki, back at the title select, we're going to jump into Ai Cho Aniki. Like Ai Cho Aniki, you have the same options here for the various menu, but one of the important things to note is the manual for Ai Cho Aniki is significantly more fleshed out than the original Ai Cho Aniki. And this is important to note because the game itself handles more like a fighting game as far as your inputs than a normal shoot 'em up does. So that's something to keep in mind. All your various commands are on this page of the manual, so you might want to refer to this one should you pick up this title. So one important thing to note about Ai Cho Aniki, the game does support 2 players simultaneous, so that's how I'll be showing it off for you today. Starting the game, we're dropped right into the gameplay. You don't get to select your characters, rather we just play as the 2 bodybuilders, Samson and Adon. And the controls are very radically different. It's still a horizontal scrolling shoot 'em up, but now we no longer have normal shots, but a whole mix of almost like fighting game-like commands. So our primary shot is a homing shot that you get if you just are not pressing any particular button combinations. However, we can get some other different kinds of shots. If we press back and forward, for example, we have this sparkle beam that we fire forward. It does a decent amount of damage and can clear a lot of enemies. Should you charge up like a sparkle on top of your head and you do a fireball-like command, you'll actually get that really powerful men's beam, which deals the most damage of the game itself, but it's actually pretty difficult to pull off. We also have attacks where we can go and fire those sparkles up and down. But of course, ultimately, the men's beam is what we want to be using. Men's beam! So that's our first mini-boss of the game taken out. So there's also the ability to move around the stage in an invincible mode where you're spinning around. Here you don't take damage, but you also don't have the ability to fire. And there's a brief second where you end that you could potentially take damage before you're able to fire. So unlike the first Ai Cho Aniki, where one hit would send you back to a checkpoint, we actually have a life system and a time system for Ai Cho Aniki. So if we take damage, we have 3 hearts, and if we lose all those hearts, then we lose an hourglass of our time. However, we're also constantly losing time as well for just playing the game. If you lose all of your hourglasses, you can see there at the top of the screen, then it's game over. There are no continues in the game, so if you're looking to finish it, you ultimately have to do so on the one continue, not losing those hourglasses. So now's an important time to bring up some of the notes of the emulation itself. So a couple things that this emulator has built into it is it does have a rewind feature. So if you were to go and press the left trigger on the, or not the left trigger, the left bump, it brings up the screen here. If you press A, it will rewind time, though only by a short bit. If you press B, of course, it will cancel out. It's a really awkward way to go and do rewind. And the rewind doesn't go back very far. Oftentimes you actually have to enter that in multiple times should you want to rewind far enough to actually correct a mistake that you made. So the overall stage progression for Cho Aniki is very similar to, Ai Cho Aniki is very similar to the original Cho Aniki, where we have multiple sections to the stage with mini bosses sprinkled throughout. So although it's not quite the same as the original where we had mini bosses at each section, now we have a mini boss, an intermission section, and then another mini boss followed by the stage boss. So as far as power-ups are concerned, the character Benten from the original Cho Aniki will occasionally show up on the screen saying, "It's showtime!" and dropping various power-ups. Those power-ups include power-ups that will increase your overall strength, power-ups that will increase our time, and power-ups that will also make us temporarily invulnerable. Although where we actually have the ability to spin around and be invulnerable, that's not a terribly useful effect overall. So overall, Ai Cho Aniki is a shorter game than the original Cho Aniki, as there's just 4 stages here, but the uniqueness of having the super large sprite in a standing position, in addition to all the fighting game moves, makes this one kind of stand out as just a unique experience. But it still has that overall bizarre design to it, where we've got these elements of human features mixed with mecha. But starting with this particular title, the series definitely became very focused and obsessed with the whole bodybuilder motif. So as we see here, we defeat our stage 1 boss, and your stage clear are the 2 bodybuilders going and showing off their muscles. When you do clear a stage, you do get some extra hourglasses, so keep that in mind. Now moving on to the second stage, we have a forest, and let's talk a little bit about the pluses and minuses, primarily of the collection itself, as the games are kind of going to speak for themselves. It's one of those things where if you want to experience something that's on the weird shoot-'em-up side, this is definitely a franchise to check out. But as far as the minus flavors are concerned, the big one that I feel for this particular title is just the price point. So coming in at over $50 US for a collection that only includes 2 games just seems a little bit too pricey for especially the digital release. So if you do plan on picking this one up, I would recommend seeking out the physical copies, as you can usually get them for the same price, and it's nice just to have that in your collection. Then as far as the other elements, so the emulator itself is clunky, just the way that it handles the overall rewind, just like there's occasionally some issues where it doesn't seem like the emulation is quite perfect, so that's something to keep in mind picking up the title as well. But we do have some beautiful things like this Stage 2 mini-boss here. This is definitely one of the funner ones, for sure. Ultimately, it would have been ideal had the collection itself included the other shoot-'em-ups, or even the full Cho Aniki series, as you had other titles in the game that were like RPGs. There was one that was a fighting game on the Super Famicom. It's just a fun, unique, bizarre franchise that's interesting to explore, and hopefully we will get collections with other titles from the series. As far as the plus flavors are concerned, though, I do really appreciate the inclusion of the manuals. It's really great for this title in particular just to go and see what your moves are. Then the whole music mode collection and the visual mode, so you can see the game's cutscenes, are definitely welcome additions as well. And then the most important plus flavor I have is just bringing this bizarre, unique shoot 'em up to the Nintendo Switch. Just going and having yet another great example of shoot 'em ups available for the title. So ultimately, this is one that I would recommend you pick up physically or maybe wait for a sale on, but it's one that I've had a lot of fun with, and if you like unique shoot 'em ups, then you might enjoy this one as well. And with that, we find ourselves at the end of this week's episode of Shoot 'em Up Saturday. As always, I want to thank you so much for joining us this week. We hope you have a wonderful week yourself, and we look forward to seeing you again next time.
Sexy Dynamite.